Joining us now for a deeper dive on the ramifications of the alleged Russian cyber attack is former Homeland Security advisor and ABC News contributor Tom Bossert. And Tom, you wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying, quote, "The magnitude of this ongoing attack is hard to overstate. We've heard our nuclear weapons could have been impacted. What other kind of critical information has been tampered with potentially?"
Yeah, good evening. I think the magnitude is the point here. We're seeing a potential of 18,000 networks, both government and commercial, that are held at risk. And so what's so scary about it is we could really wait to see any decision from the hackers, appear to be the Russians, on what they choose to do with those networks. While we're held at risk, they can manipulate the traffic, manipulate the data, even change and confuse the communications in and out and between these organizations. So, you know, people are worried about whether they can release nuclear codes or weapons and so forth. But what I'm really worried about is what they might do beyond spying to mess with our public and its trust of its institutions, and not so much right now to overreact to what operational impacts might be, you know, kind of second and third stage efforts. Now, that doesn't mean it can't happen, but in the Treasury Department, you want to make sure that our Federal Reserve System works, that they're not creating new digital money where it doesn't belong. You want to make sure that our nuclear weaponry, of course, and its codes are all protected, but many of those things are on high-side classified networks, and so we really need to look for, you know, what they do next, and it could and most likely will be misinformation and manipulating our trust in data.
This hack wasn't detected for 6 months. How does a cybersecurity firm get hacked and then have it go unnoticed for so long?
So this is really the math here that's in favor of the bad guys on offense here. They were able to get into one company, a good company, that serviced a lot of customers. Once they got into one and all of that company's customers downloaded their software updates. Think about all the times that you download an update on your phone. You don't think to not trust the update that comes from a trusted provider. They all downloaded it, and that one intrusion allowed the hackers to get into what looks like now almost 18,000 networks. From there, the question is what they've done inside. Imagine if you got home one night and your home was broken into and the front door was kicked in, and your neighbor said, "Well, ma'am, the door was broken down, the Russians were here, they've been in your house for 6 to 9 months. But don't worry, we're going to fix your front door, and we're going to make sure there's nobody in there before we go home and leave you in there for the night." You might be okay and feel a little bit comfortable, but pretty soon you'd realize that you'd be looking at every plant and unscrewing every light bulb and trying to find listening devices in your microwave and so forth. The question here is, by analogy, what did the hackers do inside these networks with administrative level controls to remain in control of those networks while we didn't know they were there? And we didn't know they were there for months.
That's a really great analogy. If, in fact, it was Russia that choreographed this, what kind of historical attack would you compare this to? And would you go as far as calling this a modern-day act of war in the digital world that we live in?
Well, they're certainly holding us at risk, and we can't tolerate operating in that environment. People are talking about counter-launching a cyber attack. We have to be careful about that if our pants are down, so to speak, and we're right now in our networks owned by them. And others are talking about launching missiles. Of course, all those things should be on the table to change and impose a cost on the Russians, but to change their behavior. I think we're going to have to do that directly, but also with partners' help. And I'm not necessarily suggesting we need to escalate to that. Let me give another analogy. Right now, the cyber planes are circling Pearl Harbor, but we don't know what they're going to do. But they control that airspace. If they take pictures and spy and go home, we might be able to de-escalate this. If they choose to drop weapons, that's a whole different matter. And the problem is we don't know how many networks they're circling and what they're capable of doing, and hunting for them on those networks is going to take years.
You, of course, worked under various administrations, including the Trump administration. You said that it's time for President Trump to get past his grievances. If he doesn't, who should step up and make the effort to create some sort of action plan between the current and incoming administration? Are you personally considering reaching out to the Biden administration yourself?
Well, I'm here to serve any president that ever asks me to help them. That's true of why I went to help President Trump, and it will be true for any future president. That's certainly my kind of view of public service. But there's no third option, really. So what I did was offer a recipe for how we could coordinate a number of very expensive, very complicated efforts. That coordination needs to begin now. There's geopolitical efforts that must be coordinated to bring our alliances together, to put pressure on the Russians. And there's also technical capabilities and technical steps that need to be taken to remediate all these networks. That all requires careful attention as well. Somebody's got to step up and do it, and somebody has to do it at some point. If President Trump and his team is doing it now, then great. If they're not, then bad. And if the Biden team enters on January 20th with a distrust of all their networks, they're going to have a heck of a steep learning curve to get up to speed, and they're going to have to figure out how to handle that crisis with a set of networks they can't fully trust.
Of course, it's your belief that this likely goes beyond spying purposes. What kind of worst-case scenarios should we be preparing for, and how could this impact individual citizens?
So it's all about the calculus of the people in control of those networks. I would, right now, and not lightly, assess that they're unlikely, if it's the Russians, to do something so profoundly disruptive, let's say costing hundreds of billions of dollars of damage, shutting down operations. I think they know that even a divided America would unite against them and consider that an act of war. I suspect they're going to make a constant set of readjusted decisions and calculus on whether they can do something and whether they can get away with it, and whether they can continue to sow distrust in our institutions. That can go on for a long time until we do something about it.
Tom Bossert, as always, we appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for ringing this bell for us. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.